And let's formally welcome everyone this morning to our first Lendology webinar. We've got 5 fantastic speakers here to help us become more informed about the built environment and also home retrofit. So welcome everybody. But before we continue, I just want to confirm and just clarify that we are recording the session and it will be uploaded onto YouTube. And it's just to help those who were unable to make the session this morning. So who are these fantastic speakers? Well, we've got Phil from APSI. We've got Russell from Parity Projects. We've got Ian from the CSE, or the Centre for Sustainable Energy. We've got Stuart from the UKIB and Ellie from Lendology. So, but before we ask our speakers to share their wisdom with us, we'd really just like to invite you to take part in a very quick poll that we've got. And hopefully my fantastic colleague, Elena, will pop these questions up. And we'd just like you to run through and answer these 4 questions very quickly. The drum roll occurs. Off we go. There we go. So the first question is, do you think the climate crisis is taking a back seat due to the cost of living crisis? Question 2, are you providing support for homeowner retrofit at the moment? Question 3, have you thought of using outside organisations to help you? And 4, which is your highest priority? We've been really mean. There's only one answer you can give. I'm really sorry about that, but you have to make a choice. And I know some of these aren't the easiest of questions to answer. So we'll just give you a couple of minutes to get the votes in. What are you doing, Elena? All good. People are voting away. Thank you very much. I don't get to vote. It's quite annoying. I don't think our panelists get to vote either. Sorry about that, panel. Next time. Another more couple of seconds. Okay. People are still voting. So we close now. So we've had 41 votes. That would, I think we'll. Okay, so hopefully now Elena will be able to share those lovely results. So 23% saying that they believe the cost of living crisis is making the climate crisis take a back seat. 20% saying no, it's still a top priority, which is fantastic. There were a number with not enough information to answer the question, and the cost of living crisis and the climate crisis are interconnected. So that's really good, interesting there. And which is your highest priority for retrofit? Increasing homeowner motivation is a clear winner there, and reducing carbon emissions. So brilliant. Thank you for sharing those. I think, again, it was just a question of just getting people in sort of onto the right page and just thinking about all the challenges that we just seem to try and wade through every day. So thank you for answering those. And we will share them with you in one of our newsletters, I'm sure. So we've got a lot to pack in, so I will be holding our speakers to their time slots, but to ensure that we've got enough time for everybody to hear their presentations, if you have any questions, can you please pop them into the chat, and what we'll then hope to do is come to them at the end of the session. So what I'd like to do now is hand over to Phil Brennan, Head of APSI Energy. Over to you, Phil.
Okay, Emma, thanks very much. So thanks for the invitation, first of all. And when we spoke, Emma, a good few weeks ago now, we mentioned, or I certainly recall mentioning that the topic I wanted to talk about was how ambitious your organisation can be about becoming net zero. And of course, I mentioned this a few weeks ago, came back to it last week. And really, I just wanted to consider some of the factors that are within the influence of your organisation and some of those that aren't. Now, I'll kick off with just a little bit about what APSI do, in case you haven't heard of us. We are owned by 250 local authorities who are our members. So if they pull out of membership tomorrow, we wouldn't exist anymore. We're not for profit. We're here solely to advise and support local government. And we work with over 250 local authorities. The other 150 we work with, they just pay a little bit more for the service because they're not members. So, clearly we're not a council, but because we're owned by the sector, we are part of the sector. And we've been around for 30 years, so we're well established, and it's not as if we're going anywhere. We've got lots of connections, lots of contacts. 18,000 officers and councillors are on our database across the whole of the UK, from Derry and Strabane Council, right down to Cornwall, up to Shetland, over to Norfolk. So, we're all over the place, really. And we've got some commercial partners, of which Lendology are one. So what we do is we provide service support for all council services, and APSI Energy, which is the part of the organisation I work with, specifically provides support and consultancy support around all things energy, climate change and sustainability. Now, you'll know that many local authorities and other organisations declared climate emergencies in recent years and said something along the lines of, this council will be net zero by 2030 or 2035, or they set a specific date. And of course, that is a super ambitious thing to do, which is very positive and, very uplifting and a great thing to do. Some of them went even further and said, we are going to attempt to make our whole local authority area net zero by 2030 or 2035, which is off the scale ambitious, really. And we could spend all day talking about those declarations. But the point is, they've been made and the targets are there, and we're all working towards them. Whether you work for a local authority or not, you'll probably have some kind of similar targets. So in order to meet those, that some of the factors to get there are under your control. They are your own assets, your staff, your financial resources, your internal priorities, and just have a look at some of those, your data, your future plans, and you can manage all those as you wish within certain restrictions, of course, and they are all under your control. But of course, some things are not under your control. So before we go any further, I just wanted to look at the scale of the challenge, really, and why we're being ambitious in the first place, and to recognise that this particular element is definitely not under your control. So Russell was just talking before we came on, and he's an air source heat pump being put in there. I hope I'm not giving any secrets away, Russell. But there we go. Let's just look at the boiler upgrade scheme. So in 2022, there were 55,000 air source heat pumps sold over 14 months of the scheme. So you can get a grant for that, and the average cost of putting one of these in is around about £13,000. So that's the scale of sales. Now, the boiler upgrade scheme received 22,000 applications. So not all air source heat pumps will get a grant, but there are, that's the kind of scale we're talking about. Half of them are applying for them. So if you look at the bigger picture, there are 24 million households in England and Wales. That's where the scheme applies. Not everybody, as I say, will be suitable for one, and we reckon that between 8 million and 12 million homes won't be suitable for an air source heat pump. And about 75% of households in general are heated by gas, and that's what we're looking to remove in order to reduce emissions. So if we take the 12 million, the highest figure, off the total figure, we get to around about 12.8 million. And if we take 75% of that 12.8 million, which are the current gas supplied homes, we come round to 9.6 million. Now, the monthly rate of sales of air source heat pumps, those 55,000 divided by 12 is about 4,500. So if we carry on at the current rate, we're talking 178 years for everybody to have an air source heat pump. So let's say we want to be a bit more generous about the funding, and we apply the average cost of 13,000 to those 9.6 homes. We can do it a bit quicker. we can do it in 123 years if we spend every penny of tax that we get in just on those heat pumps. Now, obviously, I'm just playing with figures here and you know, having a bit of a scenario planning session, really, but and it's a little bit kind of make believe. And you know, for all we know, something could come out of the woodwork tomorrow that will change everything. But in the meantime, we need to keep acting and cracking on with things irrelevant of that bigger scale, because we know it's a big job. And the point I'm trying to make here is that the scale of the numbers means we're going to be working in this context forever, you know, forever, on the basis of our working lives and our living life. So I put a limit on the word forever as the end of my life, and I expect that's the same at you. And it's a bit morbid, and I don't want to be negative about this. And I appreciate that if you are working in this context, you are not going to be a negative person, because you can't work in it without being positive about things. But it is a forever situation as far as I'm concerned. So how do we deal with that? Well, my approach is to focus on the smaller stuff, on the things that are, again, under your control, you know, to get those 50 house projects underway and completed, or to make your social housing decarbonisation fund bid for 100 properties, or get on with a 20 home retrofit job. Of course, there are, so the scale of it is out of your control, and that's the way we're dealing with it at the moment. We're dealing with the situation a piece at a time. And you know the old thing about there's only one way to eat an elephant, a bite at a time. And you're using those things that are under your control. So examples of some of those. Skills obviously is a major issue. Fife Council have had an apprenticeship scheme that has trained hundreds, thousands of apprentices over recent years, and some of them will be in air source heat pump maintenance and repair. Now, I know, having spoken to councils, how difficult it is to get hold of one of those people, and when you do get hold of them, how expensive they are. So in Fife's case, they are doing a good thing both for themselves and for the market. So, you know, is that an option for your organisation? Are you into the apprenticeship game? Are you part of that scheme? Partnership working is another thing. You might have seen something around Coventry City Council recently entered into an agreement with E.ON. They are going to invest big money in the city. Bristol have done something similar. And they're investing lots of money, billions of pounds, to meet net zero plans. Now, your organisation might not be that big, but the point is, you know, in order to meet these targets, we need to realise that we need public sector, private sector, voluntary sector involvement. So it's bigger than just your organisation. And the other thing I wanted to mention was just around pilot projects. So at the other end of the scale, so at one end of the scale, we've got massive investment at a city level. At the other end of the scale, we've got Wiltshire Council, who've recently been trialling lots of different types of electric grounds maintenance kit, ride-on mowers, strimmers, to get away from petrol and diesel versions and to reduce emissions. Now, engaging with suppliers like this is vital, of course, for them and for you. They need real-world experience for the products to get those right, and you need to get value for money, and you need to get your staff using the best kit. So our suggestion is that you get involved, whether it's around tools or vehicles or software applications or mobile working, university research, whatever it is. You know, if you're able, take that chance to get involved with those kind of pilot projects. And of course, Lendology fall into this category as well. And finally, I just wanted to mention asset management data. And it's something that you will know you should spend time on. So I'm not telling you something that you don't know here, but I will give you some examples of work that we've done. So we've worked at loads of organisations, lots of them who think they've got great data, but when they look at it in detail, they haven't. Just as a few examples, we've spoken with councils who have been paying electricity meters that were or should have been paid by the Sainsbury's cafe in the supermarkets across the road, been paying for meters for buildings that have been demolished 3 or 4 years ago. Some councils who don't know what buildings they've got in total, don't know who owns them. They don't know the state of the loft insulation or when the boilers were fitted. Now, this is basic information, and it's not just specific to councils. We've dealt with a whole load of other organisations as well, and they are virtually all the same. And, you know, if you think your data is great, that's fine, but you'll know that for any decarbonisation funding, public sector decarb funding or social housing decarb funding, you'll know how important data is. If you haven't got it, you're not going to get a grant, and that's the end of it, really. So just wanted to make that point. And just as a final comment, we've just had an event in Glasgow, and I asked that question: what can anybody tell me whether they think they've got great data of the audience? And a person put his hand up and says, yes, I know we've got great data because we report it to Scottish Government every year. Now, the fact that you report something to somebody and put that data down clearly doesn't mean that you've got it. But this particular person thought they had, and I suspect they are the type of people who will not go back and keep it up to date. And if you think you've got good information, you're probably the first person who needs to check that out. But as I say, for me, that is basic info, and you can't be ambitious without having the basics in place. Okay, that's all I wanted to mention.
Lovely, thank you, Phil. Really interesting, and I think the comments around the apprenticeships is a really interesting one, because I think any of us in this environment are aware of the supply chain difficulties, and I know that Fife have spent a huge amount of time working with apprentices, and I urge everyone to consider that if it's not on their agenda. Thank you so much for your presentation, Phil. That's really great. I'm going to hand over very quickly now over to Ian. Ian, would you like to share your words of wisdom from the CSE perspective, please?
Thanks. Right, hopefully it's going to work. Is that good? You got the slide? Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things CSE have been up to. We're an independent sustainable energy charity. We do national kind of policy work and analysis. We've got a community team that do planning work, spatial work with communities across the country. And the household energy services team work predominantly in the southwest, and our retrofit work's much more focused around the sort of Bristol, Somerset, Wiltshire sort of area. So I think some of this was nicely sort of touched on by Phil, really. So we've got oddly more money than ever going into retrofit through things like plugs and the social housing decarb fund, but still, it's nowhere near enough. The Green Homes grant launched in 2021 is a sort of well-documented unmitigated disaster, really. And a lot of that money was given back and not that, didn't hit its target. So, basically it underperformed, and it sort of undermines what we're trying to do. But we've seen this before, with the Green Deal. So I guess the message is that, if we're going to bring more installers and suppliers into the retrofit space to help us deliver, then we're going to have to encourage them, because some of them have been burnt before. They've invested in skilling up and sort of like tooling up for the Green Deal, and then that went down the pan, and the Green Homes grant didn't go well, and that was because there's just not enough people to do the work. So I might be stealing some of Russell's thunder, because he's been involved in a lot of this stuff. There's no retrofit skills strategy. The Construction Leadership Council have done some good work on this, but looking at the energy security strategy, didn't really pick out the role needed for energy efficiency. Building sector's largely unregulated, building controls not resourced, EPCs are gamed, planning legislation's not tough enough. There's a whole bunch of stuff which is negative. Let's try not to necessarily focus on that, because there's quite a lot we can do. As mentioned, Bristol via the City Leap programme has essentially put together a portfolio of work across the city. The council's done this. They then went out to investors via the City Leap vehicle, which is a joint venture now between the council and Amoresco and Vattenfall. And that is a major initiative which is going to hopefully create a huge step change in the city. They've managed to do that in the absence of all of the things you saw there. So we can you know, there is stuff that can be done to kind of raise the money needed, but we still face a huge workforce challenge. People that we lost after Brexit, you know, what we're seeing is price escalation because the same people are being kind of fought over for kind of work from different contractors. And we need to do a lot more to encourage people into the workplace. But so CSE's got a few plans to help with that. But before I talk about them, I'll just mention a little bit about our work as an organisation. So we've helped Somerset and Wiltshire Council secure Lads and Hugs funding, where we've effectively supported them to write the funding bid. We've worked on the Social Housing Decarb Fund to evaluate bids and monitor projects. We deliver PAS 2035 services. So if you're aware with that, you'll know what that's about. But if you're not, PAS 2035 is the quality assurance framework, which sits around the government grant funding schemes. So you need to make sure that you have compliant assessors and designers and coordinators who are qualified to sort of oversee the work alongside the installer. So we do that sort of work across Bristol for City Leap, and we support Somerset Council. We've recently done some tower blocks in Southampton as part of some social housing work. But we're not just doing delivery, we're helping others to build their capacity. So Frome Town Council have got some lottery funding to kind of run their own retrofit project, and Bath and West Community Energy have also got some funding. And what we're doing there is we're working with them to sort of effectively mentor their staff. So they will get their staff to undergo these PAS qualifications, but we're sort of providing back office support and a mentoring role for those organisations to help them skill up. You know, you could argue that that's going to create competition for us, but I think, as was highlighted by Bill, there is 100 years worth of work to do, and I would be CSE can't do that alone, and so we need other organisations to step up, increase their capacity. I think there's a big role for organisations like CSE to support others, because the scale of the challenge is really big. We're working with Parity projects on the Green Home Finance Accelerator. We're also members of the National Retrofit Hub, which was recently set up, which is convening stakeholders from across the retrofit piece to effectively try and come up with some solutions to some of the challenges we've got around the workforce. But we're also doing some other stuff in CSE, which is quite interesting. So for the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, we're sort of the lead on their heat zoning work. So looking at, say, a city area like Bristol, and then identifying which parts of the city would need to be assigned for heat networks. We have a program specifically for people who are happy to pay for advice called Future Proof, and we kind of help homeowners and builders in the Southwest to carry out improvements and refurbishments. You can contact us and we can do a retrofit plan for households. Just kind of coming on to something else CSE has done, which is going back to this point about trying to sort of increase capacity in the region. CSE did a bunch of work with stakeholders in the West of England area to look at what was going on in sort of retrofit ecosystem, and try and understand what we needed to change the status quo. So we brought together a bunch of stakeholders, colleges, local authorities, other kind of retrofit assessment companies, installers, builders, the councils, all sorts of people. And there was a general agreement that nobody's trying to sort of coordinate the whole piece in the area. And we felt that what was needed was a new sort of entity to take that forward. So CSE set that up. We formed Retrofit West CIC. This is a shot of the website, which is for the Home Retrofit Accelerator Programme, which the Combined Authorities just commissioned. This is sort of like holding branding. So it's not the final branding, but it's a work in progress, and that's recently started. And we're kind of excited that Retrofit West as a new organisation can do something to address some of the gaps in the supply chain. So should it ever create any profits, they will go towards these sorts of things really. So supporting people in fuel poverty, improving the skills of people who want to kind of come into the retrofit space, inspiring young people to pursue a career in retrofit, and any other community, activities that will benefit the community. So I could like waffle on forever, and I suspect I'm hopefully about time, but I don't know. So I'm happy to sort of stop there.
Lovely. Thank you so much. Fascinating. Wasn't aware of the element you were doing with the mentoring there, and that sounds such a great thing for the CSE to be doing. And as you quite rightly said, there's more than enough work and business to go around to keep us busy for a very long time. So wonderful. Thank you so much, Ian. That was really great. Now, next up, Russell, founder and MD of Parity Projects. Over to you, Russell.
There we go. Can you hear me? Yeah. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I'll just swap my screens around. So Emma's asked me to have a chat about strategizing, putting plans together, having a think about how you would eat that elephant. The key thing from my perspective as somebody that actually I tend to get my hands dirty and do retrofit. We've built a whole bunch of tools at Parity over the years that's helped me to do that more quickly, more effectively, and have discussions with people that get to a point where they themselves can make a decision. And when you're dealing with climate emergencies and making pretty ambitious targets, we hopefully can have discussions with people like yourselves to say that target is actually achievable before you've declared it. So I'll talk about some of those things in a bit, but also how we've helped some organisations as well to start actually walking the talk and putting programs in place to enable retrofit to actually happen. And it's great to see Ian's Retrofit West getting off the ground, because that's a fantastic example of how things can really start to emerge. We've been around since 2005. We've currently got an energy model for every house in the UK as well now, which helps us to understand how to run scenarios for retrofit, and how to understand how not just local authorities and regional government, potentially how central government can start to plan investments over a long period of time as well. And this is all about really trying to make sure you've got a joined up process for predicting how you will get over this very long time. And feels quite right at the moment. We're probably looking at about a 100-year program at minimum, without the sort of levels of private investment, government plan, leadership that's going to be required to bring us all together. Which is one of the reasons I was behind setting up the National Retrofit Hub with some Innovate UK sponsorship, to try and bring people together in the absence of leadership in this space, really, so that we can work out how to do this together. But the key components of all this are really so that we can understand the baseline where we're at, what should our strategy be, but not put a strategy in place that's unimplementable. What are the resources we've got locally? What finance can we work with? Hopefully there might be some kind of minimum energy efficiency standard that we can hang our hat on in one area to actually push people, but there'll be some incentives to pull people too. And what we do at Parity is this in three particular ways. The pathways methodology we've got to enable people to literally look at every single dwelling and where it is now and what's possible. The plan builder tool, so householders can log onto their own property for free, and tools that enable the individual professionals that go into properties to have a powerful method of understanding what's possible and produce a report for a householder. And these are all linked, and I think that's key. Then you can start thinking about a data strategy, and going back to what Phil said earlier on, will be surprised about how dreadful your data is. It's a degree of dreadfulness rather than how good you think it is. Phil, I'll be a bit more harsh than you. But it's tied together. I won't dwell on some of these diagrams. You can go and look back at Emma's YouTube channel to see some of these and pause them if you like. But the whole point of this, really, there is data available to enable things to happen really quite powerfully remotely before you start spending a fortune on mail outs and encouraging people to do stuff generically. You could start to actually really understand your stock very well. You could target householders and the things you know they need to do based on pre-analysis rather than sending everybody the same mail out and all you're doing is changing the address. Nobody responds to that stuff anymore. It's about being targeted and smart, and therefore do it much more cost effectively. So data availability is obviously a big thing, and housing is lagging behind other sectors. However, there's quite a lot we can do. If you can unlock that data, you can start to target opportunities. You can understand what is your challenge, work out a target that is actually achievable, as I say, but run scenarios, and I'll show you how we do that in a bit. And importantly, if you've got this in as a holistic data strategy as well as a retrofit strategy, the quality assurance as you go through all this, whether you're putting a plan in place for a household or whether you are ensuring a contractor has performed as they promised when they get the work done, it's all linked. It's a mature model. We do rely on the RD SAP, reduced data SAP, data set, the algorithms within that. And that's sensible because that is the targets that are being placed on the sector. It's a known methodology, it's quantifiable, and there are accreditation schemes that check the surveyors that collect that data. Whether or not you agree with that or not, at this stage of the game, that's kind of irrelevant. Things will change, but we have a huge data set right now that we don't want to just throw away. We can work with it. And the beauty of what we do is we don't just use that SAP score. We're calculating CO2, we're calculating energy bills off the same algorithm, and we're collecting more data to pile into that. So you're not just saying, as a DEA would say within an EPC, they've got 70% of the windows double glazed. We can measure each individual window as well. So you can start to actually provide much more granularity. And we can show you as a local authority where you're at. What's your average EPC? What's your environmental impact score? Carbon emissions per property, average energy, average fuel bill, and the sort of SAP profile of your stock. Those are things that will change over time, but you know where you're at that particular point. Grid intensity will change. If we do no work, the grid is decarbonising, therefore, we're not going to be too bad. So you don't spend more money than you need to. You don't have to get people too depressed. You can achieve things because other cool people are building wind farms off the North Sea that will help us all collectively improve over time. And Bristol's doing their heat networks. All these things contribute to a lower grid capacity. But what are we dealing with? What wall constructions, roof types, what are we dealing with overall? You can look at this throughout your whole stock. What do we need to be training people on in our local college that's pertinent to Cornwall, to Bristol, to the West Midlands, whatever it might be? That's the important stuff. We're not just firing away at training courses simply because they're available. And then understanding, when it gets very cool, is understanding these scenarios for that particular area. What are our outliers? Where are the people in fuel poverty? Planning retrofit programs and doing your marketing on a smart basis is absolutely critical, and it's cheaper to do so. And running scenarios is where it's at. I'll give you some examples of the sort of scenarios you could run in a minute. But you want to be able to go to your committee with a budget for retrofit for the next 50 years or whatever it might be and say, okay, I'm confident that these are things that need to happen in our area. And this particular example here, you can see 3 scenarios for the same local authority area. A minimum of a SAP-C scenario is going to cost £6.5 million for these 11,000 properties. If you go to SAP 81, in other words, we're up at the higher end of the EPC score. More of those properties will be impacted by those. It's a much more significant cost. If we're going to go to zero carbon, then it's an exponential rise. Showing people that you need to start at the end. Think about that big cost. Every property is affected. That's where you need to start, because otherwise you're going to be implementing things for intermediate targets that might actually be in the way of the things you want to do in the long term. That's why I put the title at the start of this as Start at the End. Just rushing towards an immediate target because it's the immediate panic that your politicians might be worried about could be in the way of doing the long-term thing. So wrapping all those together is particularly important. And then, of course, you need to be analysing the trades that do that work as well. And this all falls out of the back of the work we've been doing for now. It's 2/3 of the local authorities in the UK using this methodology. And the scenarios we can run are not just about EPCC or net zero. If you want to be able to understand the houses that will apply to HUG 2 or Eco 4 and the Great British Installation Scheme, they can be identified by this analysis as well. Plan Builder is a free-to-use tool. If you go onto in this case here, you can look at the EcoFurb website, and there's about halfway down the page there's a link to Plan Builder. Don't tell anyone, but you can access any property in the UK now through that tool. We've just not told anybody yet. I've told you guys, but please don't spread it too widely. We don't want too many people using it because there's still a few bugs that we're ironing out. But I'm very pleased that Ian's using this with Retrofit West, with the Retrofit West branding for that part of the world as well. You can see we've got a few different skins on here, and I'm probably a bit embarrassed that Retrofit West isn't on this slide here, but it can be used in lots of different guises to the branding that's appropriate. And so the latest for us is the Your Home Better program, covering all of Greater Manchester now. And Surveyor Pro, no slides on this, but this is the tool that enables a retrofit coordinator to pull up all of the things that are possible for that house and put it into a package for the householder. Not just limited to EPC recommendations, anything that's possible for that house will be pulled in. And you can have zero cost things in there as well. Just finishing up, Emma, the retrofit scheme work that we're doing now is really flying. So if you think you want to be able to run a scheme for your local area and bring in some of the departments that frankly should be part of this program, planning departments, building control, economic development teams, they're doing good work, but they're not pulled together. We can use examples like Cozy Homes Oxfordshire to demonstrate that this is possible. So this is the first scheme that ever in the UK that is profitable. It can be done, Ian. Keep the faith. If you really focus on selling a service that people want to buy, they will go for it and they'll spend money, and they'll pull in their retrofit ambitions with the extension of the new kitchen. And we're replicating that for others, and we can come up with template programs that people can tune into. But the key thing really is, how much money do I need to raise to do this? Can I use local authorities, staff? Can I use community group staff to do some of this work? Yes, you can, provided they've got qualifications. Some mentoring, with FCA Consumer Credit License wrapper, with Trustmark scheme wrapper, it can all be pulled together. What money do we need to put all this together? It's all about the infrastructure on the left there. I need to put in the training courses. What finance is available to do this? Consumer finance, hopefully with Lendology and others. But also, what essential infrastructure, scheme finance do we need? Well, you can plan all that too. How much money do we need to raise at the start to build all that infrastructure, build the team? When can I see the returns on that investment over time? Okay, for Oxfordshire, it planned out about 7 years. We could pay for all the money that we would have got from whoever's providing that capital up front. Stuart's coming up next. I've got some good questions for him. So we can try and build those models. We've got predictable cash flows now. In Oxfordshire, for instance, 15% of people that inquire will spend money. That's a consistent percentage over the last 4 years. That you can build a business model on, right? So that's where we're at. So that hopefully you can plan all this stuff now with tools, but actually demonstrable schemes that are moving forward as well. All right.
Fantastic. Russell, that's really fantastic, and a great set of data there. Some really good looking data. And as I think the key point for me from that one was the start at where you want to end up and work your way back is a really good way of viewing this, because I think you alluded to it, that sometimes many projects can get away in the way of the big picture. So brilliant. Thank you so much. So as you said quite rightly, we have Stuart up next. Stuart Leslie is Director of Buildings, Decarbonisation and Energy Efficiency at UK Infrastructure Bank. So please do share your thoughts with us now on where we can find some funding, Stuart.
No, that's great. Thank you, Emma. And interesting place to start maybe for a presentation on accessing finance and why it's important to do so from retrofit. I'm going to actually start by saying that finance on its own is not the problem. The reason I say that is we've had, up until the last 12 to 18 months, an incredibly friendly environment for raising finance for retrofit projects. So we've had a really low interest rate environment. We've had house price appreciation, which has meant that from a consumer perspective, people have had a lot of equity in their properties. And for local authorities, you've also been in a position where the Public Works Loan Board has been available at all times for drawing down funds at historically low rates from kind of 2008 through to 2020, late 2021. So I don't see access to finance as the reason why retrofit isn't happening. But actually the main issue from a financing perspective is a return on investment problem. Now, we've talked about a lot of the structural barriers for why that happens, things around customer journey, the supply chain skills, the bespoke nature of individual properties. But what I'd like to talk about for a little bit now is actually some of the structural challenges that we've got in terms of funding retrofit as a country, but then also some of the things that might start to unlock private investment, because I think we can all acknowledge that retrofit isn't going to be delivered purely from grant and public finance. It's too expensive. There's too much that needs to be done across the whole of the UK. So part of our remit as the UK Infrastructure Bank is to think about how we can find replicable and scalable models that we can take to market and allow them to kind of catalyse starting out with our finance, but then crowding in private finance later to ultimately create a functioning market in the sector, so that we've not got the current issues we've got now. We've got an over-reliance on grant, and actually the grant finance almost caps out sometimes the amount of retrofit activity that happens. We particularly see that with the public sector decarbonisation scheme, the social housing decarbonisation fund, where a lot of projects are put forward into those programmes, and we know that if an application is unsuccessful, quite often that project is then shelved until the next time there's an opportunity to access the fund, because that decision if you're a Section 151 officer in a local authority, that decision between spending money that is part of your capital budget versus waiting 12 months to maybe get somebody else to pay for it for you. So that is something that is meaning that the way in which we are approaching retrofit on a local authority basis quite often means that we've got a limited amount of projects that are taking place. So I suppose that it's that transition then from a reliance on grant, or the problem of raising additional debt that may or may not be repaid from the project itself, to developing retrofit solutions that look more genuinely like project finance. So things like, as Russell just showed in some of the work in Oxfordshire, where you've got a genuine payback period, and recognising what those revenue streams are going to be to ensure that the cash flows are there to pay back over time. And when we start to see projects that have those characteristics, we'll start to see a bit more interest from the private sector to come in and participate, and ultimately recognise that there's the ability for the private sector to come in and take some risk and put up some capital in return. But in putting up that capital, there's an appropriate risk transfer and an appropriate reward as well offered to the private sector partner, so that stakeholders on the public and private side are both incentivized to be involved in the project. So two things that I just quite like to pick up on quickly now is just that I think will probably start to unlock that private investment. We've talked a lot about data in the other three presentations, and I want to just spend a second on why data is so important from a financing perspective. So when a private sector investor is thinking about partnering and coming into a project, they want to have some certainty. They want to have some certainty of outcome. And the problem with the retrofit sector at the moment is there's a huge amount of uncertainty around what happens when you go and retrofit a property. Now, we can mitigate against a lot of that through tech, and that's where I think we've made some really good advances and got a really good understanding of what happens from certain measures. We don't have that. It's not as robust as perhaps we would like at this point in time, but I think the piece that is really challenging, and where we need to spend some more time thinking about this nationally, is how we address some of the behavioural change that occurs, and some of the anticipation of what happens behaviourally in a property once a retrofit has happened, and the variance that occurs through type of property, through amount of spend people have available for energy pre and post retrofit. For example, if you're retrofitting a social housing property, and you're retrofitting a social housing property that's in fuel poverty, you're not going to see an energy saving, a financial saving from pre to post retrofit. You're just having a warmer person. Now, that's fantastic from a social perspective, but you're not deriving any economic value. So there is a separate set of considerations to addressing the decarbonisation problem than there is to addressing the fuel poverty problem from a purely kind of financial investment analysis perspective. So it's just worth kind of calling that out and explaining why kind of some of those additional data points around what actually happens in properties, as well as kind of the installation quality points. There's the behavioural points around what people do and what they're looking to achieve as a result of having a retrofit that do then affect how much savings you can then make to your energy bills thereafter. And then there's also a piece around policy as well, because one question I get asked a lot is why we don't have that many products for consumers specifically for this sort of solution, and quite frankly why the large financial institutions aren't doing the same sort of things that Lendology are doing. And a lot of that comes back to actually some policy issues around, and it's a bit of a hangover from PPI, that the large financial institutions are really nervous around packaged products, and the fact that from the perspective of if you are looking to offer something that's specifically a loan for retrofit, there is some nervousness there around the level of experience that institution has to have in terms of dealing with customer complaints and issues around how things are installed and quality assurance. So again, that standards regime is really important. And similarly, there's parts of the Consumer Credit Act as well that place quite substantial burdens on financial institutions to redress consumers if a solution that's been implemented into a property hasn't quite performed as expected. So just a few things there. I'll just come on for 60 seconds or so to talk about the offer that we have at the UK Infrastructure Bank. So we're 100% owned by the Treasury, and we've got 4 billion to put to work for local authorities, another 18 billion for private sector entities, and really that's to stimulate market activity in some key sectors, of which retrofit is one. We have lending services that we offer. Essentially, we are 40 basis points cheaper than PWRB. We have a minimum loan size of 5 million. But the key ways in which we differentiate ourselves from PWRB is that we are much more flexible in terms of the sort of loans that we can offer around deferred drawdowns, flexible interest payments, payment holidays, and really shaping the loan to the individual needs of the project. So that's kind of on the lending side, and then we've also got an advisory service that sits alongside that, advising local authorities on funding and financing models for infrastructure projects, not just across retrofit, but in other key sectors, so predominantly mass transit, heat networks, and decarbonisation of transport. There's no charge for our advisory service, and we've been running a range of advisory projects over the last 12 to 18 months. We've built up the team over that time. And in fact, one of our initial projects was advising Bristol on the City Leap project that's been referenced earlier today. So I'll maybe leave it there. I'm sure there'll be some questions later, and I look forward to answering those. Thank you.
Brilliant, Stuart. Thank you so much. And I think many people on the call will identify with the call that finance isn't the only barrier. There are so many other barriers that we have to overcome. And one of those key things is about people's understanding of what retrofit can do for their life. And Russell pointed out that, it's about making people feel warmer in their homes, making people feel happier in their homes. And we keep sort of just banging on about carbon reduction, it kind of misses the point for the homeowner, really. But brilliant, thank you so much. And it sounds like there's lots of advice available from you and the team there at the UKIB, so thank you. So now on to our final speaker. It's our very own Ellie Lister, Operations Director at Lendology. Over to you, Ellie.
Brilliant, thanks, Em. And you took the words right out of my mouth. I think as well as just data targeting, return on investment, we also need to think about rebranding retrofit, because you say it to anybody who doesn't work in this space and they don't know what it means. So like Russell says, we need to incentivize people to do retrofit alongside the kitchen and replacement bathrooms and things like that, just to make it a bit smaller, a bit less scary. So I'll give you an overview today of the work Lendology currently does, and also some projects we've got in the pipeline to support the retrofit sector. So as an organisation, we are a certified carbon neutral. I think we were the first lender in the UK to get that badge, so we're really proud of it. And we've also just been awarded our B Corp status, which just evidences our commitment to reducing our impact on the environment, but increasing our impact on the community. We've also just joined Crown Commercial Services, which is a procurement platform for local councils, and we found that's really eased the burden of local councils being able to put tenders out to bid for our services. So we're happy to chat through that if anyone's interested. Why have a lending scheme? We've evidenced in our social impact report that for every £1 invested by councils can evidence £2.58 of social impact. So whether that's about easing economic hardship, supporting the ageing population, reducing hospital emissions, bringing homes back into use, improving the private sector generally, but of course also working towards meeting those climate change objectives. So although we can't solve the problem, as it's been evidenced, it's very, very costly, at least we can be part of the solution locally, working in partnership with other local agencies like Parity and the CSE. So what we can deliver, we recognise that local councils are not cash rich, and borrowing at the moment is costly. So we're not asking for 1.5 million up front, but we've staged that investment over a 9-year period, and we've been able to model that investing 1.5 million over 10 years, we'd be able to lend nearly 2.5 million, so just recycling that capital, and then of course that has a bigger impact on the social impact in your areas as well. This model is based on loans to homeowners of 8,000. So obviously, if we're saying a air source heat pump costs 13,000, lots of our loans are to top up grants that people have had locally in partnership with the LADs or the HUG schemes. So that's why our partnerships with local councils and organisations are so important. So we've been talking to over 40 councils across the UK about setting up a scheme, and with our existing 15 council partners who we've worked with for over 20 years, we work very closely with them to understand their local issues and what they want their housing policies to address, and then we can advise on the type of loan interest rate or the type of loan products you'd want to offer to have a policy that really does generate impact. We can support you through the Crown Commercial Services framework to get the tendering process nice and smooth, and support you hopefully with getting the capital, which is absolutely the biggest problem everyone faces at the moment. And then just very quickly to wrap up, there's 2 things we're working on at the moment. So we've worked with the Centre for Energy Equality to develop a carbon tool, so we can map all of the loans we've done for retrofit or energy efficiency works. We can pop them into the tool and generate a figure for each of our council partners as to how much carbon we've saved locally in pounds and tonnes. So we're really looking forward to rolling that out shortly, and we're hoping that will generate more investment into the scheme. We're also working with Invest to provide free calculator tools. So we've just launched on our website a retrofit grants calculator where people can put in their circumstances and then be signposted to grants for retrofit. Now at the moment that tool is quite high level, but we're working with the developers to get all of the local schemes put into that calculator. So it means that every client we speak to who are looking for retrofit type works, we can signpost them to that calculator first of all to run through if they've got any grant eligibility before they go down the low route. So I'm really keen to work with all the local councils that we currently partner with, and other partners. I can put you in touch with the guy who develops that calculator to get your details in of any local schemes, just to help raise awareness and break down this barrier of the word retrofit. So I think that's me, and there's still time for questions.
Fantastic, lovely. Thank you very much, Ellie. Yes, and that calculator tool, the building of that new one sounds very exciting, and I think there's a lot more to be had from that. So we've had a couple of questions in the chat. I think one of the ones that we had was, where's it gone? We've had a question for Russell, and I've lost it now. So where's it gone?
I think I can see it, Emma.
Can you see it? Would you? Sorry, would you? Yes.
Yeah. Does your data include income to identify low-income households or those not on low income? That's data that we would be pretty scared to hold for GDPR reasons. We can, but generally it's something that we would work in very close collaboration with the local authorities. So where you have indicators of income, and sometimes you can work with data from organisations like Experian that can give you an indication of the type of household based on credit data that they hold, but it wouldn't necessarily be about their income. There's an indicator of income. There's an indicator of other things that might point towards the household being fuel poor, for instance. But identifying fuel poor households full stop is super hard. But we can work with any data. I've got some really clever, much cleverer people than me working in parity.
Me too, Russell. Lovely, thank you for that. And there was a question from Chris Gillette around, do the panel believe air source heat pumps are the final long-term answer for domestic properties? Householders do not understand the technology, and until they do, they will not buy into it. Who wants to? I think that might be an Ian or a Russell kind of question.
I did put something in the chat. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the options we've got for homeowners, for householders even, I think you've got in major urban areas, you're going to have hopefully heat zoning and heat networks. And then outside of that, I think heat pumps probably there's a bigger role for the sort of quantum night storage heater than currently government thinks in terms of electric heating, because I think some people just aren't going to get on with heat pumps. There are vulnerable households for whom it's better to have something that's a bit simpler, and hydrogen's definitely not going to play a role in domestic heating. But yeah, I think Chris has raised some valid points around kind of homeowner understanding, and we're currently involved in Bristol Heat Pump Ready, which is one of their government's heat pump ready pilots. So we're doing a very intensive community engagement process, speaking to people on the doorstep, literally knocking every house in the street that's connected to a particular transformer, because we have to get 25% of households in a street signed up to have heat pump. It's it's the most challenging target of any project I've ever been involved in. So we're having really in-depth conversations with people about heat pumps and their understanding. And yeah, there are some people who've heard of them and are keen. Some people have never heard of them. I don't think we're going to get to where we need to unless there's a massive step change in the provision for independent energy advice. I obviously would say that because we're an independent energy advice charity. I've got a vested interest. But it's like if you think about the digital switchover, or other things that have happened, there was a whole program of trying to engage the entire public, which is missing from this.
Right. Russell, anything further to add, or do you think?
No, I think Ian's nailed it. It's not just about the heat pump; it's about all of the things. How your house performs better. We've obviously had a discussion about lifestyle. The way you drive your property is something that is just not known, let alone the tech that goes into it.
And someone's put in the Q&A here, homeowners want cheap heating and hot water, and very few care about carbon reduction over cost. And I think we'd sort of said that it is about actually trying to just change the narrative around retrofit a bit into it's about you living in a home that's less costly to live in, and you live in a better environment at the end of it. But it's that payback time that I think we're still struggling with at the moment. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. Yes, sorry.
On that, Emma, just in terms of the direction of travel, government, I think, will be, well, maybe not this government, but there is, there's going to be consultations on equalising the cost of electricity and gas. Shifting some of the policy costs from electricity to gas. They're going to look at like locational marginal pricing to try and reduce electricity prices. I think alongside the stuff that's happening in terms of supporting technologies, the government will try and shift the differential in price. And the more that changes, then the more attractive a heat pump becomes.
Absolutely. And until we do that, there's a lot of people just sat there waiting for the electricity bills to be looked at. I think we have a lot to be thankful for the gas that we found in the North Sea, but now we're paying the price of the fact that it's actually that cheap, that the electric is so expensive that people aren't moving as quickly as they have done, say, for argument's sake, in France, where they have a much cheaper tariff. Fantastic. Well, it looks like we've reached the end of our 1 hour together, and I think we may have to book another one in the future. This is the first. We'll have to do another. If it went a bit quick, then please remember that we'll have the recording available on the YouTube channel. That'll be on there before Monday, I've been assured. But before we go, I just want to say another huge thank you to our brilliant speakers, Phil, Ian, Russell, Stuart, Nellie. Really great to hear from you all. And I'd also like to thank the communications team here at Lendology. They worked so hard on setting this up and promoting this event. So thank you to our very own Elena and Jack. Really couldn't have done it without you. And finally, thank you all very much for joining us. We hope you found it really useful and really do enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.